Hello and welcome to Scientifically Speaking. Now, a subscriber asked me a question the other day because I'd mentioned pestilence and the rise of bacteria and viruses, and the subscriber asked me if I could explain it. I said, yep, I've explained this on several videos, but I've never actually made a dedicated video to pestilence. So today we're going to do that, and we're going to start off with, let's figure out what pestilence actually is and what is the meaning of pestilence. Pestilence is a deadly disaster, usually a disease that affects an entire community. Pestilence is contagious, virulent and devastating. For example, the Black Plague in Europe that killed over 30% of the population during the late Middle Ages was a pestilence. In the Bible, pestilence is usually a sign of God's judgment on a nation or people group. The God who protects and blesses is also the God who sends disaster and pestilence when it accomplishes his righteous purposes on earth. Pestilence is promised as part of God's final judgment on the world in Revelation 18:8. The word translated pestilence is often translated as plague or disaster in new versions of the English Bible. However, because the word is often paired with both of those, it may imply a greater devastation than mere physical disease. Pestilence incorporates any and all forms of public and mass destruction and often accompanies famine. Jesus forewarned of pestilence when he described the end times. After David's sinful census, the Lord brought judgment upon Israel in the form of pestilence. The Lord sent a pestilence on Israel from the morning until the appointed time, and there died of the people from Dan to Beersheba 70,000 men. God had also sent pestilence in the aftermath of Korah's rebellion for Israelites' immorality at Baal Peor. But the epidemic recorded in 2 Samuel 24 was the most deadly ever to hit the Israelites. Then God had mercy and halted the judgment. When the angel stretched out his hand to destroy Jerusalem, the Lord relented concerning the disaster and said to the angel who was inflicting the people, "Enough, withdraw your hand." Our sovereign God is Lord of any pestilence, and this is written in Habakkuk 3:5. So let's take a quick look at that. Now, anybody who's watched my channel for the last 8-9 years will understand that I like Habakkuk because it's the only place where God explains his power, and he is the only God to explain his power. In Habakkuk 3:4, his radiance was like the sunlight, rays flashed from his hands where his power was hidden. Now, older books give you the real words, and it says, his radiance, he is as the light. Lightning bolts, or horns, come from his hand where his power is hidden. Well, he is as the light means God is electricity and magnetism, because that's what light's made of. Rays flash from his hand, also horns and lightning bolts. This is a double helix, and this is where his power is hidden. Well, energy is invisible until it meets matter. You can't see electricity and you can't see magnetism until it meets matter. So that's the only God in any book that describes his power, that he is an energy being, and everything he does with electricity and magnetism. No other book, not one, describes their power. But when we go to 5, it says, plague went before him, and fever followed in his steps. So that means when God's arriving, he sends a plague. This is what is on the edge of God, the low power area, or is it the high power area? Because energy is always pushed to the boundary. What it means is, at a certain point of God's energy output, before and behind him, fever and plague are at the edge. So this is an energy content problem. So God's energy in the far front of him and at the far behind of him creates plagues and fevers. So just think about that for a while. It's an energy content area where the virus and the plagues live, the fever and the plagues live. So if there is a certain spot of energy content around God that will proliferate and encourage the growth of fever and plagues, we know it's an energy content area, an energy content Problem. The fever doesn't move towards God. The fever is at the edge. And the plague is on the edge. So as I said, it's a energy content scenario. So now that we've got that idea that there's at a certain distance, a certain point in God's anatomy where fever and plague always are. If you'd like to pause the video, you can read the rest of that. But the whole point that I wanted to get to is that fever and plague are an energy content scenario. Let's remember that. It's an energy content problem. Then we come to the reasons that God does this. What is the purpose of pestilence in the Bible? God sent pestilence to punish the Israelites for their ongoing idolatry and disobedience. The amount of idol worship that is going on this planet right now is beyond comprehension. And this means having somebody, something, or somebody in your life that is ahead of God. God sent pestilence to punish the Israelites for their ongoing idolatry and disobedience. And during the tribulation, he will send pestilence to punish the unrepentant. The first angel went out and poured out his bowl on the land, and ugly festering sores broke out on the people who had the mark of the beast. Now, I'd like to say that we haven't had the mark, because it says the sores broke out on people who had the mark of the beast and worshipped its image. Do you see anybody with ugly festering sores from the vax? No, you don't. So I don't believe that the vax is the mark of the beast, because it's not on your hand and it's not on your head, and I don't see anybody with ugly festering sores that broke out on the people. So no, I don't believe the mark is here yet. So you can add that to the list of things of nonsense that other people are talking about, thinking that the mark, because nobody's worshipping the beast. It says those who took the mark and worship the image of the beast. Nobody is worshipping the image of the beast. So taking a vaccine is not the mark of the beast, because nobody has ugly, boiling, festering sores. It might happen, but nobody's got it yet. So the meaning of pestilence is normally because of idolatry and disobedience. And as far as I can see, being a fearing man of God, this world is full of idolatry and disobedience toward God. And this, of course, is because of the governments taking God out of schools and promoting sexual deviance to children and up. Now, while we're on this, I'm going to quickly talk about Andrew Tate and what he has done and why they want to cancel him, why they want to put him in jail, and why they want to kill him. This is probably a really, really important point that could have been made on a separate video, or should have been made on a separate video. Andrew Tate is not a misogynist, and he's not a woman hater. He's a government hater. He's a hater of conspiracy elites. He's a hater of those who sit behind a desk and order governments what to do. Andrew Tate is actually telling you to reject the governments, the pharmaceutical companies, the banking systems, and all the elites who tell your government what to tell you. You see, and Andrew Tate has uncovered the fact that women didn't destroy themselves. Men didn't destroy women. The government taught women to be full of the Jezebel spirit, to be disobedient to men and God. So Andrew Tate is attacking the established system. That's why he's going to be killed if he carries on. Because every time he mentions that women have been destroyed by media and TV and OnlyFans sites and all this other stuff, he's pointing at the principalities and those who rule and the kings and queens and principalities of this world. He is actually doing a godly thing. Unfortunately, he's following Islam, which doesn't really have a saviour at all. And it doesn't... Islam does not have any power. Its God has no power. You see, I read mine earlier in Habakkuk 3:4. My God is as the light. He has lightning coming from his hands, 2 bolts of it. And this is the hiding of his power, which means he's electricity and magnetism. He's invisible. And it's a double helix of energy coming out of his hand, which I've shown hundreds of times on my channel. So unfortunately, he's actually following, in my opinion, a false religion. But then again, I don't follow Christianity. I follow the Christ. I follow the Christ's teachings. I do not follow the Catholic Church or the Christian Church, because every Bible is wrong. Every organization is religion and paedophilia, or religion and how many women can I sleep with. So there's always a reason why men change religion, and it's normally for a man's benefit. God didn't change anything, but the general story is always there, and my God explains his power. I'm not a Christian. I follow the Christ, who is an energy being who gives life to lifeless matter. And Islam doesn't offer any of that. There's no redemption, there's no repentance, there's absolutely nothing needed in any of these other religions other than to follow and blindly do what your leaders tell you that a man called Muhammad said you must do, based upon his odd revelations, which always come across as a bad copy of the Old Testament. So, Andrew Tate is hated because he is exposing the powers that be, so that you know who to fight against. We don't fight against women. We don't fight against men, if we can help it, because it is the media and the system we are in that is forcing women, and literally forcing them by, see, women easily and highly suggestible to anything that comes their way, because they deal with it on feelings and how it makes them feel. And this has ruined women, and women 20 years, 30 years after the fact are only coming to realise this. So that's why they're trying to get rid of Andrew Tate, because he exposed the system that wants to destroy women, wants to destroy men, drag you all into idolatry and disobedience so that God kills you. And then he'll turn around and go, hey, I just said it'd be really empowering if you all slept together. The enemy didn't make you do anything. He suggested it and you thought it was a good idea. When you fill your head full of the Christ teachings, stupid, disobedient, nasty stuff doesn't come into your head. And when it does, you do what Jesus said to do. You say, go away. And that thought must leave. You are in complete control of your body unless you allow fear or the enemy to control you and make you do things you never would do without the suggestion of it. All right, somehow I managed to go completely off topic there. We're talking about why is pestilence rising now? Okay, well, unless you've been stuck under a rock and don't watch any science news, most people already know that the planet's magnetic field is collapsing. The sun's output is changing, and the Earth's input is changing, because we are electromagnetically connected to the sun. So when the sun changes, every planet in the solar system will change, because electricity and magnetism runs the universe, and fusion and gravity is a pile of nonsense. So when the Earth's field starts to go down, changes happen in the atmosphere. And the reason that the atmosphere is shrinking, lowering, changing composition, is due to the electrical content of the planet. Now, there's two different ways we can say this, but I'm just going to stick with one because it's a lot easier for people to understand. Now, we live in a nitrogen-oxygen atmosphere, approximately 80-20, with a few other gases thrown in. Nitrogen, when electrified, does what? Go look it up. Electrified nitrogen kills bacteria, viruses, and pestilence. Electrified nitrogen kills pestilence. So, when the electrical content of our atmosphere is lowered, it's no longer killing them. Do you see how simple that is? And there's a ton of work that's what I did years ago. I've done some work on the nitrogen atmosphere, and that electrified nitrogen kills plagues and viruses. So pestilence comes from less electricity in nitrogen, which is our atmosphere, to kill it. So what will happen to the pestilence if it's not being killed by electrified nitrogen? It will increase. And things that have been dead for thousands of years will come back to life because of the changing Schumann frequency. I've already made several videos about the Schumann frequency, where it's actually holding your DNA together. It actually structures your DNA. And I said in the video, if the Schumann frequency changes permanently, new life will appear. Evolution will appear to happen overnight, within a generation. I'm not talking about within 20 years of a generation. I'm on about the next birth. The next birth is not the same suddenly, because different gene expressions are activated, so the expression of the organism is different. So this is all what's happening now. Less of an electrified atmosphere means more pestilence. And our magnetic field is dropping at several percent per year now. The poles are moving across the planet because the energy content of the planet is changing, so the poles have to change. They have to move because it's getting more energy than it should be, and so it's trying to reorientate a massive gigaton planet. So that's what pestilence comes down to. And what is God? God is electricity and magnetism. When you get near the full life of God, near Him, you will live forever. Nothing will affect you. You will even regenerate so that you become immortal. The further away you get from God, the closer you get to death. So what God is showing you is that less of Him, electricity and magnetism, the less defense you have. God isn't here, and so the power is going into entropy, which means the further we are from God, the more idolatry and disobedience, and the more pestilence will arrive, because God is an energy being who gives life to lifeless matter and makes it alive. If that isn't there, you go from a huge organism down to only a virus that will be getting all the energy it needs from our atmosphere, because the atmospherical energy content levels have changed. And again, it simply comes down to an electrified nitrogen atmosphere kills all bacteria. The less electricity, the more pestilence will come. And your body will start to hurt. Because if your gene expressions aren't being expressed correctly, things start going wrong with your body. So expect cancers, viruses, plagues, bacteria, you name it, it's coming. Because there's less electricity. Thanks very much. My name is Lee. I follow the Christ. And I tell you all the things that I've learned over the years that God has showed me. Thanks a lot. Bye. One final thing. God says that when He shows up, even the dead will come back to life. So that just shows you what kind of energy being He is. When you're away from God, you're dead. When you're up next to God, you live forever. Those who get closer to God lose all their imperfections, lose all their disobedience, all their idolatry. They lose everything the closer you get to God, which is why God says, read about me. Thanks a lot.